As many of you know, I read quite a lot of books for this podcast. Many of the books are very good, and then sometimes you come across a truly great book, and that's what we have here in Punch Me Up to the Gods by Brian Broome.
You never know. When you're sitting alone, just banging out words, you just never know if it's going to connect. And it's always nice to hear that people appreciated it.
And that's the damn truth, man. What a book. Oh, hey, I'm Brendan O'Mara, and this is the Creative Non-Fiction Podcast. Ooh, that's right. Now in my 9th year of doing this little shindig, this is the show where I speak to badass people about the art and craft of telling true stories. Welcome to it. Got a great conversation for you with Brian Broome as we talk about being a late bloomer, giving up, shame, love, identity, losing yourself in the work, only to have your stomach roar and snap you out of that trance. It's great stuff, man. Glad you're here. I'd like to introduce you to a new sponsor who's going to be on this CNF journey for the next 40-ish episodes or so. You ready? So, Creative Nonfiction Podcast is brought to you by West Virginia Wesleyan College's Low Residency MFA in Creative Writing. Now in its 10th year, this affordable program boasts a low student-to-faculty ratio and a strong sense of community. And you know how big I am on community. Recent CNF faculty include Randon Billings-Noble, Jeremy Jones, and CNF Pod alum Sarah Einstein of Mott fame. Check it out. It's like episode 11 or 12. There's also fiction and poetry tracks. Recent faculty include Ashley Bryant Phillips and Jacinda Townsend, as well as Diane Gilliam and Savannah Sipple. No matter your discipline, if you're looking to up your craft or learn a new one, consider West Virginia Wesleyan, quote, right, see that pun, in the heart of Appalachia. Visit mfa.wvwc.edu for more information and dates of enrollment. As always, you can keep the conversation going on social media at CNFPod. And if you're feeling kind, man, leaving reviews on Apple Podcasts goes a long way toward validating the enterprise for the wayward CNFer. Guys, I'm not a big name by any stretch. I argue that I'm a no-name. Maybe somewhere in between. Maybe like a meh name. In any case, if someone's passing along and they're just like, I'm looking for a new podcast, but then they see that there's like hundreds of ratings and they're like, I'll give that guy a chance. That's where you can step in and say, I'll do a little review here and help other people get in on the joke. So in any case, if you have the time to do that, by all means. I know Apple doesn't really make it easy, but if you can do it, big fist bumps to you. Here, I'll hit my little pop filter. This is a fist bump, okay? Only the good stuff here. You might also want to consider becoming a member at the Patreon page. Why? Well, I'm putting together the next issue of the Audio Mag. Issue 1 on isolation, free for all, will remain in the podcast feed. But issue 2 and beyond, exclusive to the Patreon community. Patrons get lots of cool goodies on top of that. And also the knowledge that they're supporting writers and the CNF community. You don't want to miss this one, CNFers. So go to patreon.com/CNFpod. Do a little window shopping. Doesn't disappoint. And from now until August, I plan on giving the loudest of shout-outs to Hippocamp 2021. It's back, baby, in Lancaster. All right, I grew up pronouncing Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Lancaster. It's Lancaster. That's how you do it. That's how you're in the know. You'll probably get a little button in your goodie bag. In any case, Lancaster. Registration is open. It's a conference for only creative nonfiction writers. Well, let me rephrase that. It's a creative nonfiction conference. You can write whatever the hell you want, but this conference focuses on CNF, baby. Marion Winnick will be this year's keynote speaker, and I'll be delivering a podcast-themed talk. I got a good one lined up, man. Working hard on it. It's going to be good, dude. It's going to be good. Can't speak highly enough of this conference. August 13th to 15th. You dig? Good. I think that's enough housekeeping. Brian Broome's Punch Me Up to the Gods is a special book. It's a brilliant book. Gut punch of a book. And here's a little more info on Brian from his website. He's a poet and screenwriter, is K. Leroy Irvis Fellow, an instructor in the writing program at the University of Pittsburgh. He's been a finalist in the Moth Storytelling Competition and won the grand prize in Carnegie Mellon University's Martin Luther King Writing Awards. He also won a VANN, V-A-N-N award for the Pittsburgh Black Media Federation for Journalism in 2019, and he lives in Pittsburgh. Hey, Brian, his book checks all the boxes, man, and if I'm being honest, so does this conversation. Here is Brian Broome. Huh.
Well, I shift back and forth from excitement to, like you said, disorientation to just abject terror.
Right.
I had somebody ask me the other day, like, like, this is a lot. Like, you're giving up a lot of yourself in this book. And I think it finally hit me, like, oh my God, lots of people are going to be reading about things that I have been ashamed of for years. But in a way, it's kind of cathartic. I didn't put all my secrets out there, but I put enough of them out there so that I think that I'm being truer to myself by telling some of this stuff.
For sure.
And I hope it helps other people who may be going through the same kind of things.
Oh, I imagine, because such a central tenet to the whole book is this is identity, and finding identity and being at odds with it too, from a culture trying to impose a certain identity on you, and then you trying to really swim through all that swamp to find out like who you are and embrace who you are. That's really, I felt that tension throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what if somebody asked me what the theme of the book was, I think if I had to boil it down to one word, it's shame. Just being ashamed of who you are and what you are, and doing going really, really out of your way to avoid feeling that shame, which includes, just getting messed up on drugs every night, and pretending to be something that you're not, and placating people, in order to just be loved, or get some sort of semblance of love. So yeah, that's another thing that I think the book helped me personally, or is helping me to overcome, because I'm still trying to overcome it. But yeah, I hope that other people who may have felt that way in their lives, or are feeling that way, now connect with it, and sort of look at my book as a set of cautionary tales.
Yeah, it's when you speak of the shame, the consequences of it are, I mean, sometimes it would come down to your father like doubling you over, just beating you senseless sometimes, and then there's just other social ostracizations, or whatever, however you want to call it. It seems to come from all sides, physical and mental and intellectual, like you name it. It just it was a hard, like a hard turbulent waters for you to paddle through.
Yeah, I didn't know how to deal with or process the kinds of emotions that it spawned in me. So I think, I wound up hurting myself in a lot of ways. And because I didn't know how to process my darker or more tender feelings, I wound up hurting other people, which is something that, I'm greatly ashamed of as well. Yeah, I think another aspect of the book is, men are talked out of our more tender feelings. We don't, in our culture that so values this weird idea of masculinity, we don't get to process the things that hurt us, or the things that make us sad. You have to put up this front all the time. I think particularly in black male masculinity culture, you are not supposed to have any feelings apart from maybe anger and lust, and everything else just gets pushed down. But in the way that I did, I took my bad feelings out on other people. You can look around, look at the news, and you see men taking their bad feelings out on people every day.
Yeah, and you illustrate that brilliantly by using Twan as a device, young Antoine, this little boy on the bus that you see, and that just crops up every single way as a way for you to have almost like a conversation with your younger self, right?
Absolutely. I when I saw the father and son on that bus, and the way that they were interacting, I immediately got out my pad and pen and just started taking notes about their interactions, because it did remind me very much of, myself, and not just my father, but, all the other male figures in my life growing up. The father on the bus was teaching his son, what not to do. You know, these are things that you cannot do. You cannot cry. You cannot, sing and flail your arms. You cannot sit a certain way. And it reminded me of all the things that I was told. Because you're a boy, this is the long list of things that you can't do. I just immediately connected with that, with the child, and did see myself in him. And I also saw a lot of other young black boys in him.
Yeah, and it was so poignant, and each time each section of that would come up, I was just always just so intrigued of the direction you were going to take it. What was going to be the next insight that you were going to glean to kind of trampoline you into an element or something from your own life. And and in one particular instance that I thought was particularly poignant was when a white woman had sat across from him and was being playful and goading and kind of doting on him, and you wrote that I want to get up the block her view and tell Tuan that when it comes to white people, he has a shockingly short time to be cute before he becomes threatening. And I was just like hit in the gut by that, because there just was so prescient, and it's an observation that just really hit home, and it's just like this. I don't know. It just really struck a chord.
Yeah, and I absolutely believe that that's true. I think black childhood lasts as long as white fear, until
Mm.
white fear kicks in. I think that there's been research done that shows that black children are often seen more adult, at the same age than white children, but than their white counterparts. And I noticed that myself in my own life. We do get very short childhoods. Black girls are sexualized earlier. Black boys are seen as threats. You know, whereas white children don't have that to contend with. Black children don't get the folly of adolescent or childish mistakes. I think that black children are viewed much more harshly, by society in general, and you can see that, in the news, and just with the stories that are going around right now. The folly of youth does not exist in black childhood. Can't do anything wrong.
And at what point did you realize that was this device of using this experience of observing, Tuan and his father was going to be this recurring thing that would crop up at the beginning, essentially, of every chapter or every section?
Really late into the process. The book was being written. I had already decided to use the Gwendolyn Brooks poem, and I was going to sort of use that as a skeleton on which to hang the narratives. But then, I saw this kid, and I was like, I got to find a way to wedge this in there. So it was pretty late in the process of writing the book that I decided to use that narrative tool.
Yeah, that must have been, just given how far along you might have been in the process, it must have been almost like unsettling in a way. I was like, but the urge to do it was like, no, this has at all costs, I
Oh
have to
yeah,
get this thing in.
oh yeah, and my editor has the bald spots in her head to prove it from tearing her hair out. You know, yeah, and she was a great help. But yeah, I was like, we gotta wedge the story in there. I need another. to buttress these stories. Like I think this is really important to tell the story of this young boy.
And how long was that bus ride?
Oh my God. Have you ever taken a bus in Pittsburgh? Like a slow bus? It was the 61A, I believe, from McKeesport to downtown. So however long that takes, I think you probably have to look at a Port Authority schedule. But it's gotta be like, an hour. I dare you to go take right after we're done here, go take the 61A, drive to McKeesport, take the 61A and take it all the way downtown. It's a pretty long bus ride.
Very nice. Yeah, I was wondering how long it was just in the book. Is like, is this like a 15-minute exchange that Brian was able to kind of tease out throughout the whole book, or was it really a very long
No,
ride?
no, it was a long bus ride. So yeah, I had plenty of time to sit there and eavesdrop and look like a complete crazy person, like by taking notes about this father and son's interaction.
I want to get a sense of what you're reading these days as a I'm always intrigued by what writers and creative people are putting into the tank that nourishes them and also inspires them.
Well, I have started Kiese Layman's Heavy. Now I wanted to start it earlier, but I was writing my book at the time, and I started reading his writing, and I was like, I can't read this while I'm trying to write something. Like I will be just discouraged, and I will never want to write another word. So I'm reading that now, but I really haven't had a whole lot of time. I've just done graduate school, and I haven't had a lot of time to read for pleasure. But I do remember the last book that I really enjoyed was Interpreter of Maladies. I can't remember the name. Oh, Jhumpa Lahiri. But I'm not reading as much as I want to. I think that when all this is over, when the book comes out and I get a little bit of downtime, like I cannot wait to go into my back garden just with a book and just read and read and read. But I have, I've been binging some TV shows.
Yeah, that counts. I mean, the way TV and certain movies are these days, I mean, you can glean a lot of inspiration from that you can try to transfer onto the page somehow.
Absolutely. I've been doing a lot of Love, Death, and Robots. I forget what else I'm watching. Just really crap. Like just nothing that's going to feed my soul or intellect. Just really lightweight stuff. But I do have a stack of books that I really want to get to. One of my favorite authors, who wrote a book called The Kind of Light That Shines on Texas, Reginald McKnight. I reread that recently, and yeah, people don't talk about him a lot, but I think he's a brilliant writer.
And given that you've got a big stack of books, grad school, this book's coming out that you've been working on, no doubt, for a long time. How do you handle overwhelm and making sure that you're getting work done but in such a way that you don't feel paralyzed by the sheer glut of it all?
Oh man, that's a question I was hoping you could answer for me. Yeah, I have no idea. Like there are days when I'm like, oh God, there's a lot of stuff to do. And also, I have the kind of brain where if you give me, four tasks to do, it's really as if you've handed me like four screaming babies. Like I don't know which, like I'm bad at prioritizing. So there are days when I feel overwhelmed, but then I remind myself, you go back to what your shrink says. You can only do one thing at a time. You know, there's no way you can do, if you try to do two things at a time, you're going to do two things badly.
Yeah.
So I just try to, I do my breathing exercises and I just remind myself you can only do one thing at a time. And you also have to build in time just for yourself. So you can just lay on the couch and watch, Love, Death, and Robots, or just sit outside in your back garden and do absolutely nothing, drinking a cup of tea. So those are ways that I try to calm myself down from all the stuff that there is to do in a day. Thank God I don't have like kids or anything. That would just be a disaster.
Yeah, no kidding. I know my wife and I don't have kids. We just have a wonderful dog, and we're just overwhelmed by just the sheer, I don't know, just the everydayness of every day. And
Yeah.
yeah, I can't. it's all I can do to just stay saying I don't know. It's just sometimes it just I think it's Cal Newport who says, you just have to slay the productivity dragon sometimes, which is
Yep.
you just got to go in there and just start knocking off things. And actually, the momentum of it, it's like, oh, okay, this is doable. Yeah, you just
Right.
check off one thing and you just, yeah, it creates its own momentum and the flywheel goes. You're like, okay, this isn't so bad after all.
Right, right. And then when you get done, you do feel like, okay, that wasn't, like you said, it wasn't so bad after all. Like I did the thing that I was dreading, the thing that I didn't want to do. I did the thing's over, and now on to the next thing. I was talking to my mom about, speaking of kids, I was talking to my mom recently, and my mom had 3 kids, and a job and a house and bills, and she made dinner every night. I was like, how did you do it? And she just said, there's some things that just have to be done. You don't have time to think about how much you don't want to do it. You just do it. And I try to take that into account in my own life as well.
For sure, for sure. And regarding your writing, I wonder what everyone brings to the page and into the work their own struggles with the craft of it and putting it together. And I have myriad struggles that I deal with and insecurities and you name it. So I wonder what are some things that you struggle with that you overcome to write the things that just at least light my brain up for sure.
Well, I'm trying to get over my fear of just letting it suck. I somehow seem to be under the impression that the words that, or the story that I want to get across should fall out of my head and onto the page perfectly. And by the time I get to the page, I'm like, oh God, what was I just thinking? I have no idea. It all just leaves my head. Like, and so I'm trying to get over that. I'm just trying to let it suck, like my first drafts, because in a lot of ways, like this fear of it sucking is what keeps me from writing anything, you know, that's some fuel for my procrastination. Um, I'm trying to, form wise, I'm trying to learn how to write shorter sentences.
Hmm.
I'm the I'm the queen of the run-on sentence, like just trying to get every thought and idea and detail, all into one sentence. And so, form-wise, I'm trying to like be okay with just smaller sentences and smaller ideas, and also just having a little bit of faith in the reader. That the reader can figure out what I'm trying to say or the emotion I'm trying to get across or the visual I'm trying to implant. So those are definitely struggles. But the biggest one is just do it and let it suck the first time. There's room to improve. There's room to change. You can go back to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's just it. It's for people who purport to say that there's writer's block, like what they're saying is they don't know how to write poorly to get the good stuff. It's
Right. Right.
it's you have to be able to sit with the bad stuff, and I love hearing you say that. I love hearing when other people say that. Like it's just a matter of being comfortable with bad because if you can sit with that long enough, it has no choice but to get good if you just keep at it over and over
Yeah.
again.
Exactly. And I also had problems, having other people tell me it was bad. Just doing like workshops and things like that. You get very precious about your writing, and I'm trying to be less precious about, just writing a wholly bad piece of essay. It happens, and the art of it is just is whittling it down until you get that thing that you want, and hopefully people can appreciate it.
If we talk about like baseball or a sport or anything else that's kind of, let's just say, physical, where there's a tangibility to what it means to do for rigor and hard work. There's sweat, there's blisters. It's like, yeah, I put in the work.
Yeah.
um, when it comes to writing or something more creative, it can be a little more fluid or liquid. It's hard to sort of get your head around. So for you, maybe, Brian, what does it mean to have rigor and tenacity in this line of work?
Uh, I think James Baldwin said something, and I'm gonna paraphrase it. He and it really I read it a long time ago, and he said something like talent is not uh, special. He said, and I sort of quoting him here. He said, "I know a lot of talented ruins. People who were super talented but didn't do any of the work. You know, um, and I took that to heart. Like when I read that a long time ago. In terms of like tenacity, like I really there are two motivating factors. One is like I really want to tell this story. Like, I really want to, and to push myself to do it because I'm also the queen of giving up. So I feel better after I want that feeling of accomplishment after it's done, after I've done it, and I feel like, okay, now you're building a muscle, you can do this. You prove to yourself that you can do this. And also money, like I don't get paid unless, if I like living indoors, I got to do this work. I just I try, the fight is to just clear out all those voices in your head that just keep telling you that you can't do it, and that nobody wants to read this, and you're wasting your time. I still have those voices, by the way, but that's where the tenacity comes in, the fighting of those voices, because that's all the people who told you that throughout your life, and of course you want to fight those people. So yeah, that's where it comes in for me.
You're speaking about sitting with, letting the work suck and staying in that pocket for it to get better. And of course, over the course of an essay or in the course of a book too, you're going to be sitting with that for a long time, and then the honeymoon period is going to end when at the germ of that idea, you're like, this is great. Then you're going to get to the middle, and you're like, this fucking sucks.
Yep.
How do
Yeah.
you push through that ugly grind of the middle to get to the end?
Sometimes I don't. You know.
Yeah, well, you
Sometimes,
said sometimes you give up, right?
yeah. Sometimes I don't. Like there. It's so complicated. It's like sometimes you're writing something and you're like, this just isn't working at all. Or you finish something, like not even the middle. Like you get to the end and you're like, this that didn't work at all.
Yeah.
And you either decide like, okay, maybe this was just, sometimes it's just a bad idea, or maybe not a bad idea, but just something you can't do. The sucking, I try to let it suck. I try to at least get to the end and then walk away from it and come back. If it still sucks 2 days later, then it probably sucks. If I don't feel like, okay, this little tweak here, or maybe move the structure around a little bit. If I feel like there's absolutely nothing that can be done with this garbage, sometimes I do just go, okay, well, and I never throw anything away because there's something in there, that in this sucky piece of whatever I just wrote, there's something in there that can be used. I didn't get the idea for no reason at all. There's something in there that can be used. So I have this huge folder, on my computer that's just called sucky drafts. And then when I'm writing something else, I'll think back like, oh, in that sucky draft, like I wrote like 3 sentences that would work perfectly here. So hopefully, those are things that help me get through the sucky, this sucks part.
Oh, I love that. And do you just kind of, as you're writing something else and you realize that maybe in that sucky drafts folder, do you just kind of remember that you might have a few sentences, or do you have a way of potentially like organizing it, or
No,
is it,
there's
is it just memory?
no, it's just if it didn't exist like on a computer, it would be a pile of just paper on the floor. Um, it would just be a messy pile. But sometimes, I'll be writing something new and it will, connect to I'll just remember like in that sucky draft, I was kind of talking about this. And then you go, you know, through that pile, that messy pile, and you find that sucky draft and you're like, yeah, this worked perfectly here. I did that, for the book, with different terrible things that I had written before. There are some lines in the book that definitely come from the sucky draft folder.
And over the course of, anybody's writer journey, there's usually some sort of an early victory that's just like, oh yeah, maybe I do have a little bit of what it takes to parlay this into something greater or something sustainable, even a career. So maybe for you, like what would you identify as an early win that put fuel in your tank that put you on this path?
Um, when I got out of rehab, I started writing again while I was in rehab. I got out of rehab, and I was afraid to leave my house because I was afraid that if I go out of this house, I'm going to relapse, no questions asked. So I
Mm.
stayed at home all the time, and the way that I communicated with people was I just wrote all these super long, tomes on Facebook. And a friend of mine said, the stuff that you're writing on Facebook, like I think it's publishable. Like you should submit it somewhere. And I didn't know what that meant at all. He sent me a link to a place to submit something that I had written, and I submitted to them. And then like I don't know, it wasn't even that long later. Like they contacted me and said, "This is great. We want to put it in our literary journal." And that's when I thought, wow, okay, like maybe, of course, I've since learned that that doesn't happen ever. Uh, it has not happened to me since, but I think that felt really good. I felt like, this is something that I can do. And I thought maybe this is what I'm for. I remember consciously thinking like, because I've never known what I'm for in this life. Like, I'm not, I didn't think I was very talented, or I thought, well, okay, I should probably just work in call centers to make money, and maybe find a boyfriend. That was my big goal.
Mm.
I remember thinking, this is what I'm for. I think this might be what I'm for, and that's a big moment.
And now, where are we in time when that happened?
Oh, this was when I've been sober for 8 years, so this was maybe 9 years, no, 8 years ago. It happened after I was sober. It was one of the first things that happened to me after I got out of rehab. This friend of mine who was teaching writing at the time, and who lived in Boston, I think at the time, said you should really try, letting other people besides your Facebook friends read this stuff. So, yeah, it wasn't that long ago, and there are days where I still doubt it too. But I do remember that feeling of like maybe this is what I'm supposed to be. I've been searching for something to supposed to be for a very long time. Maybe this is it.
That's incredible because that would have put you probably what, late 30s, maybe early 40s.
Let's not talk about that.
But for the late bloomers out there
Yeah,
who
I'm
it's
51, and so it was when I was 42, I think, and I'm definitely a late bloomer. The first, I'm I deeply regret like the first 41 years of my life, because I was just drunk all the time. That's what I did. That's what I thought I was for. Just drunk and high, and getting thrown out of bars, and treating people badly, and lying, and that's what I thought I was for. But to come on the other side of rehab, and find out, maybe, wow, there was actually something that I was good at this whole time. Definitely a late bloomer. I encourage people who are older, don't give up. And I know how cheesy that sounds, but your life isn't over just because you've gotten older. In some ways, you can even start it all over again.
Yeah, it's great to hear you say that because so many people, well, we live in a culture that celebrates and almost fetishizes precocity and youth to the
Yeah,
point where it just really can suffocate someone who might be a late bloomer or comes to it late and feels like maybe, well, the fact that I didn't make any of these anthologies by the time I was 31 or whatever, maybe I shouldn't even start. Or if I've been on the journey for a long time and I haven't reached that sort of metric, then maybe I'm not good enough at all. So it's just
right.
it's just always reassuring to hear people who come to it late or bloom late to realize that if you really love it and love the craft and love getting better and celebrating the work of others, that your time, it's there for you if you just want to improve and love the work.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I would say that with anything, not just writing, just any, I mean, maybe not, uh, becoming a gymnast at 50 might not be a realistic goal, but
Right. Yeah.
um, there are other things that can spark joy in you, like and like you say, I think that's a really good point. Our culture really, really celebrates youth, and I think that there are specific reasons for that. I mean, and as you get older, you start to feel less and less relevant in the world. But I think that that's a constructed thing. Now I feel better about myself than I did when I was 25, and that's worth it. I was talking to an old friend of mine the other day. I used to work in a lot of restaurants in Pittsburgh, and she and I worked at a restaurant together, and when we were really young, and she said, would you want to go back to being young? And we really sat there for a while because now, at 50ish, we're starting to feel it. You know, this is a downhill slope now. And we both came to the conclusion like, no, I don't want all that craziness again. I did it. It has made me who I am, but I'm okay. I'm okay with who I am right now.
And one thing I love about your memoir as well, and being most, I feel like most people who write memoirs, there's always a moment in the memoir where they talk about writing or writing the memoir or becoming a writer. And I love that your book doesn't do that at all. It just lays out your story and doesn't, have this moment of, how you became a writer. It just is your story. And I don't know if that was tactical or you weren't thinking about it, but it was definitely something that caught my eye as someone who reads a lot of these. And I just really liked it because it really allowed us to really just sit with your story.
Yeah, I mean, I think me becoming a writer isn't really relevant to the story that I was trying to tell.
Yeah.
There's a mention of it. I mentioned, I think, in one of the earlier stories that I used to write all the time. Like when my sister gave me a diary that she didn't want,
That's right.
um,
Yeah.
and I used to write in it until somebody told me that was faggy. I think is the word that they use. I got made fun of for it. It was like people thought it was weird, and so I stopped. And I do mention it in an early story, like that's I do want people to read my stories. But then I got teased out of it. I think a lot of men get teased out of a lot of things that they might be interested in when in their youth, and writing was one of them. But I think that's the only time I actually mentioned writing in the book.
And where do you feel most alive and engaged in the process, whether that be the writing or the editing or whatever? Where's the big spark for you?
There are moments when I have to fight myself into a chair. I have to fight myself to look at the thing that I'm supposed to be working on. I have to trick myself into maybe touching up a couple sentences here and there, and then like that's the last thing I remember. um,
Yeah.
because I'm in it, and hours go by. Like um, when I was writing this, like I would start touching up little sentences, and then time would erase, and then the only reason that I would know that okay, maybe I should stop now, or maybe I should take a break now, is that my stomach would just be rumbling um, from just hours and hours of not eating or drinking anything. Like that feels kind of good. I don't, it sounds really
Yeah.
weird, but when you're in that zone and you're just in your head and you're trying to like, remember details and you're trying to really talk to somebody who isn't there, you know, that's what a lot of writing is for me. You're trying to talk to somebody who isn't even there. So you don't get like a facial reaction. You don't get, anything. You're really trying to make them listen to you. Those moments where you just kind of zone out, like that's the most enjoyable for me. And then after I'm done, I go and I eat a Pop Tart or whatever, and I come back and I look at it and I'm like, this sucks, but um, but actually when I'm in that zone, it very rarely sucks completely. It's always something that I can work with or change, or something that I'm proud to hand to my editor and say, what do you think of this? But those little like time loss moments, those are the best.
Oh, I love that. Kind of a two-parter here in terms of you're getting into it as you said, and with regarding this book, you can piggyback it onto this. Is there a ritual by which you try to prime the pump so that you can better get into it And and maybe what's the routine by which you set up your days to make sure you're in the chair, as painful as it can be sometimes to get into that chair.
Oh God, I got nothing for you. I I was just trying to explain to somebody like there's a point of saturation of not doing it. When it's just looming.
Hmm.
Yona Harvey, one of my favorite people and one of my favorite writers, um, I asked her, how do you do it? And she said, sometimes you just got to go, fuck, I got to do it. Like, I may as well go write the damn thing, you know? So there's no rhyme or reason. I wish I was one of those writers. And I know these kinds of writers who, you know, they sit down at, 9 a.m. with a cup of coffee. And they were like, okay, I'm going to write until 3. And they do that, you know, 3 or 4 days a week or something like that. I wish I could be that kind of disciplined person. But I my routine, I guess, is to just not write until it's just beating me up inside, and I have to go sit down, and try it, and and get over the fear of it sucking. Sometimes I
Yeah.
just completely trick myself. Like there's a desk at which I write all the time, and sometimes I just go into the room where the desk is and just sit around the desk and walk around the desk like a lunatic,
Hmm.
like in this weird game of duck duck goose, and then I'll just jump into the chair and start to sort of like trick myself. It's really very dramatic. You should see it.
I,
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
we, I think we definitely need some video of that for sure.
yeah, I can provide it, like, and just start working on it. But I can't prime the pump because I'm always too sort of anxious around it. So the only way for me to do it has been the best way for me to do it is to just rip off the band-aid, as they say, and just start going. Unless I'm on the bus. Like I really like writing on the bus for some reason. That calms my nerves, and I just write. I've written on the bus for before this book. I used to just write this daily update on Facebook about the P1 bus here in Pittsburgh, just for laughs and to get people get people to read the story that was happening on the bus. So writing on the bus calms me, but you can't really, I can write about the bus when I'm on the bus, but I can't write anything else. Um, or I just have to trick myself into doing it.
Yeah, well, what I like about what you're saying too, there's a context there, whether it's circling your desk and anything like that is the area where it happens. Whether if whether you're in the seat or you're walking around and jumping in or whatever, it's there are these little triggers that put us in a context where we can start to get that work, whether it's one particular playlist that you only play when you're trying to get work done, whatever, pick your inspiration. But when a note from that playlist goes off, it's like, okay, now it's time to write, or I'm
Yeah,
around my desk. Like that's where the writing happens, or
right.
on the bus. Or like I write about like there's a certain context there. And if you can lock into that context, then it's just like, okay, the mind sort of, it just becomes unbridled within that context, I guess.
Absolutely.
There's a poet who I'm blanking on her name, but she wrote a bunch of love poems just on an airplane. Gonna quickly punch in here. The poet I'm referring to here, her name is Tiffany Jenna. So she does a lot of traveling for speaking, and she just writes poems. And so the whole collection is just like poems, love poems from in an airplane. But that's like kind of a context for her. There's the thrum of the engines. It's writing in there. It's somewhat isolated experience, and where else are you going to go, or what else are you going to do? And I kind of like that idea. She gets a lot of writing done on an airplane.
Absolutely. My publicist just told me that she knows that one of her clients will take the bus, or not the bus, the train from Boston to New York like 2 or 3 times a week or something crazy like that, just so she can have the time to write. I don't know how long that trip is, but like she's like working on her novel or whatever, like while she's on the train, which I think is insane. But at the same time, I can kind of see it. I can kind of see it. I like writing on the bus because I do like that sensation of motion while I'm writing. It feels safe. There are only a few places that I write where I feel safe to do so. That's at my home, like a particular corner in the Carnegie Library, and on the bus.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that. Um, and something I wanted to talk to you about too was just structure overall. It's something that people like that people struggle with, just or it's something that people really have to think about sometimes, and you can piggyback it right to your book too about the calculus or the internal dialogue you were having, or maybe the external you're having with your editor about how to structure this particular story.
I'm a slave to the braid. um, I really am. Like I find it so hard to get away from it, and that's just because of the way my brain works. Like I'll be writing something and I want it to be like straight up linear prose, and then I'll think of something else that might tie into it, and then the next thing you know, I have a braid. Like the whole book that I've just that's coming out tomorrow is a braid within a braid within a braid. I I do find kind of playing with the structure to be more fun. I have written things that are just like that go from A to B to C, and while I like those stories, like I'm always looking for a way to tell the story that is different, and there's only so many things you can do, right? I mean,
Yeah,
but structurally, I would love to be able to tell, a story like backwards, uh,
yeah,
just go from the back to the front, or put the front in the middle. I would love to be able to do something like that, but who has that kind of time to, you know, to to experiment like that? But when I'm writing something that just goes from A to B to C, or when I'm writing the upside down checkpoint or the upside down check mark narrative with the climax at the top and the denouement and all that stuff, I'm always thinking like, what can I wedge in here that will play with the structure a little bit. But I think going forward, I will try to challenge myself and just write something that goes from A to B to C because there's an art in that too. Definitely, there's an art in keeping the reader's attention and just writing a traditionally written narrative.
well, a great decision that you made for this book too was you, you were sort of in search of a certain kind of love, or to have it just said to you, you know in words that you understood, and you hadn't had the maturity yet to understand the actions of your parents, though they're not saying like "I love you, Brian," but every little action along the way was a form of them saying love without saying the word.
Right.
And you actually essentially put the pen in your mom's hand for a good chunk of this, and I wonder if it. I wanted to ask you about that, about the decision, and if your mom really wrote it, or did you like sort of ghostwrite it for your mom?
Well, I went to her and I said, I'm writing this thing, and I interviewed her. So that piece of the book is literally comes from me and my mom sitting in a room at my aunt's house, and me shoving a big old microphone in her face and just asking her deeply personal questions. And from her answers, I tried to extrapolate what she might be feeling at the time. I was just asking her about specific chronological events in her life, and she was very open, which was very special because my mom is not that kind of person,
Yeah.
particularly with her son to talk about some of the more unsavory details in her life. Like my mom comes from a generation that just doesn't talk about that kind of stuff, and a culture that just doesn't talk about that stuff. But she was super open to it. When I wrote it, I did not show it to her. I told her that I was doing it, and I would call her back and forth and ask her to fill in blanks here and there. And she, once again, was very forthright and told me the stuff. So, yeah, that comes from an interview. My mom told me originally that she was not going to read this book because she was certain that there were things in it that she didn't want to know. I sent her one anyway. I thought, well, I'll send you a book and you can just put it on your shelf and say, look, my son wrote a book. But 2 days later, she texted me and she said, in that way that, boomers text, love book. And so I immediately called her because I was like, I need more than love book. What do you got for me, woman? And she said she loved it. She believes that I portrayed her young life accurately, except she had one little quibble about something that I got wrong. She told me that she was talking to my sister about it, and how they were talking about how sorry they were about things that happened in my life. And I thought, well, that's the last thing I wanted. You did the best you could do, and you do what you did what you knew how to do, and you were great. But my mother wasn't demonstrative in terms of love when I was growing up. Like I say in the book, I was looking for that TV sitcom love, that love that with that sort of produced love that you see on television, where kids or parents are constantly fawning over their children, and hugging them and kissing them and giving them allowances, and telling them they're special all the time. I did not get that, and when I grew up, I found out not a whole lot of people got that.
Hmm.
And so the fact that I didn't get that left me feeling unlovable. But now that I'm older, I know that I was deeply loved. I think both by my mother and my father, even though it may not come off that way, or in the book, and it didn't come off that way to me when I was a kid.
Yeah, and there's a real touching moment too, where your mother, who never watched a whole lot of television, and especially after your father had been laid off from the mill, and that he was a looming presence in the house when he kind of lost his meaning. We were talking about meaning and purpose earlier in our conversation. Your dad had lost that for a time, and and your mom has the neighborhood over to watch SNL because Luther Vandross is going to be on, and the way they ultimately come to identify him and sort of make fun of him, like your mom, articulated how she felt about him, and it rung right, and it fell on your ears in a way. It's just as struggling as a young gay man, and and hearing her describe Vandross indirectly described you, and that was just such a I just felt for you in that moment.
Yeah, that it's one of those big moments in your life that you remember, but nobody else does.
Hmm.
um, I had asked my mom about that, and she was like, "I totally don't remember." She still likes Luther Vandross, by the way, but she was like, "I totally don't remember that." Obviously, she didn't mean to hurt me in that, um, but I do remember in that moment thinking like that was like kind of the last straw for me in thinking that my parents loved me, right? Okay, so my mother had kind of been my advocate, for a long time growing up, but in that moment, I remember thinking, well, shit, like she doesn't. Once she finds out, like that's gonna be it for me. Like I'm not gonna have parents anymore. And again, obviously she didn't mean that, but I just remember that evening so well because there was so much you know, female energy in the room, so much women's energy in the room, and the excitement around we're going to see what a man is supposed to be. That's what I felt. All of the women in the room loved Luther Vandross's voice. They couldn't wait to lay eyes on the man himself. And when they did, something quite different happened. And, I wound up feeling more terrible about myself in the aftermath.
In what way did writing this book change, or maybe not change, the relationship you've had with with your mother and your siblings?
My brother, the jury's still out. Yeah, he hasn't read it. I don't know that he will read it, but we're fine. My brother and I are very, very different. He has like 80 kids. Um, I'm seriously like 80 of them. Like it's crazy. He, he has a wife and 170 kids, and he's very busy. And this book might not be his particular kind of fare. My sister's reading it now. She says that she loves it, and we've talked about a few things that happened in it. We had a great conversation the other day where she was telling me something that she remembers from that time that really affected her, and I completely don't remember it like at all. So I love that. I love that there are these little moments that are kind of just for you that other people, don't remember. But as far as my mom is concerned, all I wanted her to be, throughout my whole life was proud of me. And although she was proud of me, I didn't feel it because, that wasn't something that she said. That wasn't like her love language, as they say. But, the other day she said, I'm very proud of you. I love this book. We've had more intimate conversations about my father, where she's told me more things about him and his life, and just my family in general. So I think that this book that I was afraid to put into the world, if it has done one thing, it's really improved my relationship with my mom. And yeah, it was a good thing. And if nobody else likes it, she liked it, and that's good.
Yeah, and that's your immediate family, and I love too how you talk about the family that you made for yourself, especially when you got to Pittsburgh. So, what was the how what was that experience like for you to to carve out your own path and find your own people somewhere away from northeastern Ohio?
What was it like? I immediately found, I think, the coolest people in the city at the time. This sort of like queer, partying. We were young, and I had never met people like that before. I had never met people who openly said that they were atheists, and I had never met people who had really sort of sex positive attitudes toward all kinds of things. And they did drugs and they drank martinis and they went to the ballet, and it was just great. And I felt cool for the first time. I interviewed a lot of them, for the book as well, and like the big moments, they don't remember them either. Possibly because we were all drinking all the time, but it was great to feel like accepted, my weird self accepted. But, at the same time, I was lying to them the whole time too about, who I was and where I was from and my background, so they didn't really get a chance to know me either. And that was fine by me because I felt like the real me was unlovable. And if they found out, that they would reject me. But you know, having those relationships and having that kind of fun that you do when you're in your 20s, I mean, nothing, you can't replace that. You've probably got some good stories. Um, everybody does. But it felt good to be accepted, even though the persona that I was putting out there wasn't totally me. But, I've talked to many of them too, and they were like, we just liked you. We didn't like any of the weird shit you told us. We just liked you as a person, and that's why we were your friend. And that felt good too.
Hmm. And you end the book by following in Baldwin's footsteps by going to France and essentially writing from the sharp, jagged rocks of the southern French beach. And I was wondering, like, why was it important for you to sort of end the book with basically a letter to Antoine, from the shores of Europe?
When I went there, it was first of all like a big thing for me. I'm a very anxious person. I am always looking at the worst case scenario, and I've decided like I've got to do something. I've got to get out of this. Like I got to. I didn't know what to expect, but I was like, I've got to at least try to do something. So I thought, I really like James Baldwin, and this is where he's from, and I'm going to go there. Very like wild hair, decision. And when I got there, I couldn't believe like how I felt, you know. And I say in the book, I'm sure there's racism in France, but it ain't nothing like American racism.
Yeah.
I felt free. I felt unencumbered by this idea of race. I felt, I can't say it strongly enough. I felt free, like I had been carrying a weight around my whole life that somebody, took off me, when I got to the airport. Um, and I just spent the days, and I went to Paris as well, and I went to St. Paul de Vence, and that letter was really written there, or a draft of it was written there. And I thought, I would love to be able to tell my younger self that this exists. You know, that the world that he was living in is not the end of the world. That's not everything. There's so much more in terms of just space on the planet, and space to be whoever you are. And so that was the idea, like, behind writing that letter. It's really, of course, uh, to Brian, but I thought Tuan should know too, and so that's where that came from. But I don't know if you've ever been to Paris, but it's beautiful, and I just felt like I've never seen anything like this before in my life. And St. Paul de Vence, I was like, I've never seen anything like this before in my life, and I walked around by myself. I was able to prove to myself, that I can do things. I don't have to be encumbered by all these constraints that people keep trying to put on me.
Right, and speaking of the just encumbered nature of things, that one chapter you wrote, called Gravel, when this just racist asshole with his presumably two young daughters in the car, just kind of rolls up on you there, just and and then another time when you're like in the tunnel walking home from the bar, and then cars are just buzzing by, you just get a sense of a suffocating nature of what it must be like, to be in this country. And like that crackling of the gravel to me was just such a haunting sound to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, when you're born into it, it becomes what you think life is. You
Yeah.
know, when you're born into it, and your parents are telling you, you have to be careful around white people, and you experience racism. You learn, to, you either do one of two things. I think you become really defiant, or you learn to try to shrink yourself, or just know that there's so many limitations for your life. And I feel like when I got to Paris, like, I just took this deep breath. Like, I don't know what it was. There was just a different feeling in the air. There's a different feeling walking down the street. There's a different feeling going into shops, and
Mm.
just being, that I definitely felt. And I definitely felt like I connected with James Baldwin, Josephine Baker, the African Americans who left this country and decided to take up residence in France and just pretty much never looked back. Like, I got it. Like, I definitely got
Yeah, more recently, I believe Ta-Nehisi Coates spent a few years in
it. Oh,
Paris too.
really?
I think so. I think he's back now. I think when Trump was elected, he realized, as a hardcore journalist too, he's like, the fight is
Right.
back in the States. But I spent a considerable amount of time in Paris, I believe.
Yeah, I think that if I ever have children, like, and if I ever have the means, like, I would take them there. I would move there. That would be the only thing. I mean, my family and obviously my life is here, but I think if I ever had children, I wouldn't want them to grow up experiencing American racism. I would want them to be free of that. They could come back if they want to, but I think they would be different people. I think they would be better prepared to deal with the kind of racism America dishes out.
And Brian, as I want to be mindful of your time, so as we bring this airliner down for a landing, I want to just ask you if I know, right?
Sorry,
A
that was
little.
my airplane noise.
Yeah, a little. Exactly. That's nice. It's usually when I bring this down, it's far more turbulent. That was very relaxing. But I'd love to get a recommendation from you for the listeners. And like I said, like I like to preface people, it could be anything from a book to a pair of socks or a brand of coffee. It's whatever you want and whatever is on your mind and what you might recommend to anyone out there.
Oh my gosh! I knew this question was coming, and I didn't think about it. I mean, I guess if you're in Pittsburgh, I would recommend Pauline's Caribbean Food on the North Side. But this is a national show, right?
Yes.
Um, damn. Love, Death, and Robots. That's all I got. That's all I got. It's such a good little escape from reality. Just watch it a bunch of different times. Um, I don't know. I can't think of anything. What have I done lately that's really been super cool? Write a book. That's my recommendation.
Right.
So,
I'm in agreement with you. I think everyone should write a memoir. Not everyone should publish one, but everyone
right.
should write one.
Everybody should write a memoir. And I think also, and this sounds really strange, I think everybody should go to rehab. I learned more about just life and depression and anxiety and what I had been doing to deal with it in rehab than I learned anywhere else. It wasn't just about like the drugs and alcohol. You get real coping mechanisms, I think, for life. So yeah, watch Love, Death, and Robots. Go to Pauline's Caribbean Food, and write a memoir, and then go to rehab.
I love it.
Not necessarily in that order. I mean, you can take them in any order you want. So
Fantastic. Well, Brian, I love it. Thank you for the book, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk shop. It was great talking to you.
thank you very much, Brendan. You have a great day. I appreciate it. It was great being here.
I mean, how great was that? I mean, he before we had turned the mics on, he was just like, I haven't said a word all day. You're getting me. You're getting my first words of the day. And I was like, hell yeah. We got good words. And it was on Monday morning when we recorded too. And I got the first words from Brian Broome on a Monday, the day before his book published. I mean, come on. Brian Broome is at @bbrom on Instagram. BrianBroome.com is his website. The book is Punch Me Up to the Gods. Carve out a place for this sucker on your bookshelf. It won't disappoint. It's a book you're going to want to revisit. And big thanks to West Virginia Wesleyan's MFA program for making the show possible. Head over to mfa.wvwc.edu to see if what they are offering is right for you. Check it out. Also, HippoCamp 2021 is happening. If you want to go to the Best Writers Conference, full stop, check out what Donna Tallarico has built and join us in Lancaster, PA, August 13th to 15th. You got it? So, I've been decluttering a lot of stuff, donating books, raffling books, and I'm up against it. Like, I don't own that much to begin with and don't have too much clutter. My wife would argue, but that's just because I have a bad habit of not putting things away, and as a result, things accrete. For two people, our house is massive, so, pretty much the smallest house we could buy a few years ago. Anyway, my point is, as I get rid of the physical clutter, I'm finding that it's not physical clutter at all that's really bugging me. It's mental clutter. It's trying to be all these things, juggle myriad projects, hobbies, trying to stay fit, eat right, drink beer, hike, camp, draw, write, podcast, day job, cook, clean, meditate. Gotta always be self-improving, and on and on. And there's no amount of physical clutter that I can get rid of that will appease this constant sense of overwhelm. Something's gotta give. I have several extenuating projects that need to be finished. And when they're done, I can't backfill that space with more. Not yet. Like I want to watch a movie without feeling like I should be reading or writing or podcasting or hustling for better clients. I'd like to read a novel or a biography for a non-podcast related experience. These are all first world problems, I get that, and it oozes with privilege. But it keeps me from being whole and wholly present. It's the whole spinning plates, and each bowl with a plate is wobbling like nobody's business, to the point where the audience can really sense that they're going to come crashing down to the ground at any minute and shatter. And isn't that what they're hoping for? Will he break? I was telling my wife how much I'd love to build wooden boxes with just hand tools, no power tools, to store my journals and my notebooks, or to even make gifts. I mean, what's cooler than like a handmade box, right? She just looked at me. I was like, okay, I needed to say it out loud, okay? I know I can't do it. I know I don't have the time to do it, but I just want to make things with my hands. She was like, you have lots of paper and pencils. Why don't you just draw? You already have the stuff. I said, "You're right. I won't make boxes." Then she said, "You'll just give up when making boxes becomes too hard." And I was like, "There's no need to twist the knife. I just needed to say it out loud because the only other time I get to talk is into this microphone." And then I got out my sketch pad and started drawing pictures of grizzly bears paddling canoes. Anyway, do me this solid, all right? Stay cool, CNFers. Stay cool forever. See ya!